for somebody that wants to be a top performer, has that thought of being a world champion, or at least in the top 1%, welcome into that group somewhere. What are some of the things they would have to say no to say yes to having those sort of outcomes of elite outcomes or top level outcomes?
For most people, I think it's obsession. It almost can't be faked. It has to be a natural drive, maybe an OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder type mentality, where it's just all you want to do, all you think about, putting, like you talked about earlier, more hours than everybody else. And it almost can't be faked. It almost has to be something that comes, you have to want to do that. Because you can fake it for maybe a day or two, or maybe a week, but you can't fake it for years, right? This is or you're going to be real miserable and probably have some sort of mental breakdown.
If you don't have $1 million yet, you're living a much lesser life than what could be easily available to you with the right guidance. My head coach has freed up a few spots in his calendar to hold one-on-one strategy calls with the highest quality applicants. If you're doing well already and you're looking to accelerate your momentum and do even better, click the link in the description now and apply for your strategy session. More at the end of this video.
Today I get to chat with Mike Brown. Mike Brown is the WEC champion 3 times. That was a league that got brought into UFC over the years. With the homie Reed Harris. I know Reed. Reed's a good man.
Yeah, I've been around a long time.
And so 3-time champion at WEC, which today would have been the UFC. And you're one of the most respected coaches that I know. A lot of people that train with you, Dustin Poirier, Joanna, can't say her last name, Jurjacek. Joanna Jurjacek.
I don't speak Polish either. I do my best, but it's not perfect.
Well, my legal last name is Buszkowski. And she was making fun of me when we sat down together that my ancestors are Polish. I've been to Poland, but I'm not from there. Yeah. But she's like, she said, come on, Buszkowski, let's say my name right. So in any case.
That sounds like her.
Andrei Arlovsky, you got a stable of champions down there that many of them speak very highly of you. And I'm honored that you take some time to sit and chat a bit.
Thanks for having me. Our team's doing very well.
What got you interested, tell me about early Mike Brown, what got you interested in, you wanted to be a fighter?
I grew up wrestling, and just somebody gave me a UFC tape, early UFC, like UFC number 2 or something like this, and it was like love at first sight. I was like, damn, this is unbelievably pure and cool and interesting, and I mean, there's no money in it or anything like that at the time. It was open weight class, heavyweights only, but it was just something that I thought was really beautiful and something I wanted to learn how to do that. Watching like Hoist Gracie in the early days, to me there was nothing more cool, nothing more pure, and I didn't understand why everyone wasn't obsessed with it. I'm like, how are you not obsessed with this? Especially if you're a guy. I can see maybe a girl, but a guy, this is it. This is better than any sport that's ever been, no doubt about it. So I just started training just for fun, just to learn skills, and then the sport started growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then eventually you could actually make a living out of it.
At that time, I know Hoist Gracie a bit, and he's going to be at one of my events in a couple weeks, and then he's also going to be at my home in about 3.5 weeks. So we're spending a few days training together. But
special guy.
He is. And when I talked with him, he talks about just his whole mood or attitude or philosophy is probably the right word. His philosophy about fighting. He has so many traditions of honor burnt in his head from his father that I never had a conversation with anyone quite like him. That he really thinks about very precise principles. I know you have a very complex brain, and you're thinking about many of the same types of things or more advanced things in some respects today, but. Yeah, I thought he was a very unique guy, and I see how he inspired a lot of people to want to fight and be involved in that.
Huge.
I'm excited about training with him. I never had a gi on in my life. You think we're going to have a fuss together about the gi?
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be an uphill battle, that's for sure, to say the least. I've never trained with him either. I've had some friends that have trained with him. I've watched him train. I've never had the pleasure of that. but he was like an idol of mine for years. At that time period, most every aspiring MMA fighter, right? What he was doing was amazing.
Yeah. So you're watching this, and you fought at like 145, yeah?
Yep.
So you're walking around at that time at 160-ish, 165.
Yeah, right on the money. 160 to 165. That's exactly right. And that's eating what I wanted. I didn't have to diet too much until fight week. Then I would kind of lower my calories, cut a little bit of weight, and I'd be right on.
When I eat what I want, I get close to 300. And when I have a very strict diet, as you'd imagine I have right now, I'm a mere 270.
It can go up quick. It just depends the volume of training that you're doing too. If you're in the gym a lot, sometimes it's you need the more calories to fuel that body.
I got involved in the MMA stuff a bit, I was always interested in the back of my mind, just the way that you said.
Yeah.
And Jake Shields is my main coach. Jake helps me a lot with jiu-jitsu, and
awesome.
I'm not great. I'm 7 months in. I literally started 7 months ago, and some of the guys say that I'm doing extremely well for the time that I've put in. But I'm about to get a blue belt, and so I'm not exactly. I'm not going to win a UFC title anytime soon.
Start somewhere.
But
yeah,
just in 7 months, I'm just thinking of the fitness aspect of the training, as you mentioned, that. I lost about 30 pounds of fat. I gained about 10 pounds of muscle in 7 months' time. And I still eat whatever I want to. I just, smaller portions of it. But just, time training and, wrestling and boxing and kickboxing and, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. You burn a lot of calories.
And it's fun.
Yeah.
It's
it hasn't felt like work. I learned so much.
You're learning a skill. You're having fun. You're messing around and building muscle, Then it's much easier if it's not work. If you're not I can't do that. It's hard to drag yourself in there and do something you don't want to do. But if you want to do it, it's so easy.
I would hate to have to do that for money, but as a sport, is a fun hobby sport. I'm having a little renaissance in my brain of all the activity that goes on, that you have to learn new things, remember little nuance, and be able to do it in real time. It's one thing to intellectually know something. Right. It's another thing to be able to do that in real time when your cardio is waning and so on.
Yeah, it's chess, right? It's like human chess, right? BJJ is kind of complex, chess movements, really, right? There's so many options, and you can get creative as you want. You can make things up and see if it works. So,
how do you think of the intricacies of this? I bet you have something, no pressure, but I'm certain you have something, a detailed opinion about this, that when you see people in the audience, so I go to a lot of the UFC fights now. Never went to one before November, just last year, but now I've been to close to 20 probably. And, sit in the front row, second row, and watch the happenings. And inevitably you hear somebody behind you that probably never got punched in the face in their life, and they're saying, stand them up, or boring.
Right. Hecklers,
in your experience as both a world champion and a coach, how do you think those folks would do if they had to trade places with people?
Of course.
Boy.
Of course, they do terribly. But I've always wished that I could somehow. I wish I was in some sort of science fiction world where I could wiggle my nose and put them in the cage at that moment, all right, put them in there and then let them feel the stress and the pressure.
Yeah.
And see how they deal with it. It's not easy in there. It's not, going live, sparring in the gym is not easy, right? It's very tiring. It can be scary. You do it for a fight, in front of however many people, where the guy's really trying to hurt you for big, everything's on the line. Your ego's on the line, your money's on the line, your health is on the line. It's a little bit nerve-wracking. It's not easy.
And you got years of training, maybe decades of training beforehand, before you were in that spot. Yeah. And you worked on your cardio. You had to go through the drudgery to make weight, to be there, to be dehydrated, rehydrated, go do the media stuff that's expected of you. And maybe some of those guys probably don't want to do the media stuff. Some of them they're fighters, and they're probably nervous to go talk on the camera 100%. Or be in front of the press. So then there's a lot of stressors in there that a normal person, I think, wouldn't be able to anticipate or appreciate.
For sure. I think with more experience, it gets easier. But so I think also there's a lot of just overall performance anxiety because how you perform controls how much money you're going to make. Not only that night, but your future dramatically, right? This is going to change your life. Am I going to win or am I going to lose? Am I going to get a raise or am I going to get cut, right? So this is so much is on, never mind getting hurt. Like you being a provider for your family is on the line right now, right? And then you got some guy heckling you while you're trying to do your job. I get it. It's entertainment, but it's not easy being the fighter sometimes. So in some ways, it's been nice with these shows at the
Apex.
At the Apex, right? No crowd. It's like so low stress. It feels like you're just practicing, really easy. It's kind of nice. But on the other hand, like those big wins don't feel quite as special when you don't have like everybody screaming and going bonkers. It's still pretty awesome, but the big pay-per-view shows where people are going crazy, it feels a little more amazing at the end.
I've been to both. I've been to more shows at Apex than any place else, maybe 10 or 12 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I seen you there just recently, a week ago or 2 weeks ago.
Maybe Andre, probably. Were you at Andre's fight? Yeah.
I was at Andre's fight, but there was another one recently. I hear mixed thoughts from the fighters that, in some of them like that, it's less stress, more intimate.
Yeah.
But then, you could hear every word in the audience. You could hear the commentators talking about you in real time. And then you hear the other, the other side's coaches. So little sound bites that somebody told me. I don't need to say their name, but one of the people told me that during their fight, that the other coaches are telling her opponent that you're down 2 rounds, blah blah blah. Like you got to win this fight, and that gave my friend a bit of false confidence that. It ended up going to judge's scorecard and it went the other way.
Yeah.
And she's like, what the f-? Even her own coaches are telling her she's down. So she sincerely thought she was winning from her own perspective, from the commentator's perspective, from the opponent's coaching perspective, and then the judges gave the decision the other way, and she's very frustrated by that.
That's a tough one. Because you can only make a guess, right? It's subjective. Everybody's got a different opinion on those rounds, so it's not always what you think it might be. You kind of have to know when it's a close round that it could go either way. So anytime it's any relatively close, you got to assume, maybe you got to assume the worst just to make sure you don't pull the foot off the gas and keep fighting hard.
I hear. What other elements? It doesn't have to be something controversial or whatnot. But what are elements that keep your brain alive or active? That you started wrestling. You must have started wrestling 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's literally, yeah. Now more than that, I guess. So yeah, I probably started when I was like 13 years old, 12 or 13. As I was a freshman in high school. I was a young freshman, and I started then. I'm now 46 years old. So yeah, it was more than 30 years ago.
Third of a century.
It's crazy, right? Most of my life. Yeah.
I made my first entrepreneurial money when I was 7, which is small-time kid stuff,
Yeah.
But people ask me, they're our age, and they're like, is it too late for me to become an entrepreneur? And I'm like, well, you might have some disadvantage. It's not too late for me to take up MMA, but probably I'm not going to learn things that you got a 33-year head start on me. I got a lot of catch up to do.
What was your first business? First major business?
Well, my first real business as an adult was property management.
Yeah.
But as a kid, just little kid stuff. You shovel snow and rake leaves and walk dogs and clean cars and paint a fence
the money and you're like,
Huckleberry Finn and anything I could think of that I might be able to. You literally were walking around the neighborhood looking for a problem that you could solve for a mutually beneficial gain. So
yeah, you're collecting money at an early age and learned how to do it.
I still pick up money at the airport. When I go through airport security, I always find a dime or a quarter somewhere, and I get so excited.
Growing it, yeah.
And I laugh if someone's with me. I say, I'm going to turn that into $1 someday. I find like 10 cents. I'm going to turn that into $1 someday. So I have that burned in my head. I don't have to work. I don't have to do anything I don't want to do financially anymore. Yeah. But it didn't start off that way. But it ended up that way because I had some of those thoughts of, still pick up a penny if it doesn't look like a biohazard. If there's not a dog turd on top of it,
Yeah.
I'll still stop and pick up a penny or
Me
whatnot.
too.
But I digress. So what's kept you excited, 33 years in?
Ah, man, I think the sport's evolving faster than ever. And I think if you watch it in the last 5 years, the technique's changing so quickly, which is crazy because I thought it would have slowed down, but I actually think some of the evolution has picked up and it's evolving at an even faster rate than ever before. I think for a couple of reasons. I think one is obviously the internet. It's easy to everybody study and film and things like this. And I also think since this CTE has been brought to light and it's really open and people talk about head trauma, that people are sparring a lot lighter than they used to, which allows you to be more creative and try new things in the training. And then people are coming up with new ideas and new tricks that people never dared to try before, because it used to be, if you made a mistake in sparring, the guy's going to try to kill you. He's literally going to try to knock you out in the training. But now I think the sparring has changed quite a bit, where it's much more controlled, and I think you learn more by doing that. I don't think you need to kill each other in training to get better.
My main MMA coach is Jake Shields, and I trained with a lot of other guys that But Jake comes and sees me like he'll fly to me. We'll spend like 3 days together every 4 weeks. So it's more than 10% of the year.
Yeah.
And we'll get in 9, 10, 11 hours on the mats during that time. But in his spare time, Jake's 43 as well. He's a couple months older than I am, and in his spare time. In his 40s, he still sits around and he's watching, MMA stuff or usually jiu-jitsu stuff on his computer. So if he's alone, he'll hang out in my living room, and he'll be watching, more jiu-jitsu technique. He's already one of the, I think you'd agree, one of the most respected people that was ever at UFC in terms of his jiu-jitsu skills. Yeah.
Fought for a UFC title. I think he was Strikeforce champion.
Yeah, he's 3-time Strikeforce champion.
Long list of accolades, and super strong grappler, always has been.
Yeah.
Very, very, very high level guy. And now it appears as he's like now turning into a pretty damn high level coach as well.
He says exactly what you said about the evolution of the sport. That he says that there's a lot of guys that maybe they got a black belt 10 years ago and is a bit of a joke compared to some of the things that are happening today, that they wouldn't be able to keep up with the evolution of the skill
evolved.
set.
Yeah. 10 years, if you had a skill set that hasn't changed in 10 years, you're in big trouble. It's moving fast, and I think there's more money in it. It's more popular than ever, so more people are doing it, and it's just there's tough guys everywhere, and never mind top to bottom in the UFC, small shows have really, really high level guys, these kind of second tier shows like LFA and RFA, these ones that, they're not on pay-per-view, they're maybe on UFC Fight Pass, for free. Not many people in the crowd, but these guys are pretty damn high level, especially the guys like main event, co-main event. Very good. I mean, they're UFC level fighters, I think, usually. They're coming or going. Either they're going to the UFC or they got cut and they're now in that spot. But those are UFC level fights, at the top end of those cards.
I had a fellow said to me, I won't say his name for obvious reasons, but said, the things that were going on in the 90s, the early UFC fights, so those people be laughed out of there today, that there's, the skill set's not there. And I thought that was, in my head at the moment, my perspective, I'm like, wow, that's a little disrespectful. And I didn't say much about it, but just, I'm like, I wonder why he thinks that. And I went back and I looked at some of the fights, though, and then I understood. And I looked at, UFC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I watched the early ones.
Yeah, amazing.
And I thought, wow, that, cause there's things, I'm quite a rookie compared to you or a lot of the people that you're training with, but there's a lot of opportunities that I've seen in some of those fights. I'm like, oh, just do this, or oh, just do that.
Yeah.
And then I kind of marveled at that. I'm like, wow, what that really means, or the way that I interpreted that, is like, wow, like some of the coaches and trainers I've had, they taught me things that, literally or didn't exist 25, 30 years ago, or were unknown. They were, so high level that, these are like the best martial artists in history by far, that, more than any ancient tradition, something by far.
Yeah. I mean, it's like running a science experiment, all these fights that we're having, right? Where you're trying out techniques to see what works and what doesn't. And fighting technique has evolved more in the past 20 years than the last, 200,000 years, easily, right? It's gotten so good so quick. And like you were saying, that in the early 90s, when UFC was like November 93 was their first show, that was so primitive. I mean, you can only be the best of your era, right? But like you look at those guys in today's modern world, and
yeah,
it's very low level compared to what we're dealing with now. Just people didn't know. People just weren't educated on what worked, and there wasn't a lot of fights to study. But yeah, very, very interesting stuff.
I'd say the other side of that coin, to pay them appropriate respect, is you can't judge someone outside of the era that they lived in. Is ridiculous. And additionally, some of those guys were brave as hell and tough as hell.
Way more brave. Yeah, way more.
They didn't know what they were walking into
100%.
Necessarily. So there are a lot more question marks of who their opponent was.
Yeah.
And they came to win. And also, by the second UFC, you had 4 fights in a night. The first one was 3 fights in a night. By the second one, you had to be the champion at that time. You had to beat 4 tough men of
one night.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you 100%. It's like way more courageous back then. Back then, you had no idea what you're walking into. This was like, you didn't know what martial arts some guy might know on the other side of the earth.
Yeah.
Now we kind of know what works, but then you're just signing up like, hopefully my martial art instructor in, Nashville, Tennessee is teaching me the right stuff, because I'm fighting some guy from Holland, who knows what he knows. If he's got some technique that will, kill me with one touch like in the movies, who knows,
You probably, I've traveled 66 countries, and I'm sure you've traveled all over the world for various things. And, a lot of the guys who would have been involved in those fights, that they may have not left their home state.
Right.
You didn't have the same worldly experience.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you got athletes from all over the world that you had no idea what they were coming with. Yeah, it took a lot of courage back then. A lot of courage. Just the fear of the unknown. And the rules were it was like no biting and no eye gouging, very limited. It's like you can get creative as you want. Who knows what these guys got?
There's one video I was shocked at the guy's punching the other guy, intentionally. He's punching him in the groin about 4 times in a row.
This is probably like Keith Hackney versus Joe San.
Joe San.
Famous
I couldn't
fight.
think of it. Yeah, it was.
I know the
I
UFC.
could picture him, but I couldn't think of the name. Yeah.
That time period's my favorite time period. Like UFC 1 through 10 is like, I love that time period. So it was so cool and so interesting. It just taught everybody about martial arts. You got style versus style. Okay, let's see what happens. Like, it's like running a science experiment. Throw this sumo guy in with this kung fu guy. What the hell is going to happen? It was so interesting to me.
Chuck Liddell's become a friend over time, and Chuck was telling me he was over at my place in Chicago. 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago, we were training together. Chuck's not a gentle guy. I had bruises for 10 days. Chuck's in his 50s.
Yeah, but
Chuck's in his 50s.
Yeah.
I had bruises 10 days later in numerous places on my body. But Chuck was telling me a story from the late 90s. He said he goes to Brazil, and he got himself involved in this fight. It's like one round, like 30 minutes.
Yeah,
There's basically no rules.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen them, so I have less context for it than you do.
Bare knuckle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said bare knuckle, 30 minutes, no breaks, no timeout, no break, no coaching, no water.
Yeah, just go. No, he was tough as hell. This was, in the beginning, this is what it was. It was no rounds, no time limits. It was just lock them in a cage and fight. And that's what I really love, the purity of it. The idea of you lock 2 guys in a room, you don't mess with them, you don't touch them, you see who would come out of that room. It's a simulation of like who would survive in this type of situation. It really bothered me actually when they started doing rounds And then when they started doing stand-ups, when it's boring, I was losing. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, they're destroying our sport. I mean, I get it now that you're trying to make it a little more action-packed, it's going to generate more revenue. But early on, especially, I was a purist, and it really bothered me, because to me, it's like, no, man, this is a simulation, man. You lock these guys in rooms, you don't mess with them. You see who would survive. Whatever technique works. If it's exciting or if it's boring, it doesn't matter. That's what fighting is. Let's see what truly works. Instead of like, well, no, okay, we're going to stand them up because we want more action. But it's big business now,
Well, a moment of humor from Chuck's story. He says the night before that fight that he's in the locker room. The guys are kind of getting ready and looking at the arena or whatever I don't know if it was an arena, but the spot
I know
where
they
they're
fought in
fight.
like a boxing ring.
He says that his opponent has kind of come over, kind of shoulder checking him and talking shit to him, and he's like, man, I don't speak Brazilian, I don't speak Portuguese. And the guy's, like acting like he wants to fight right now. And Chuck's like, yeah, man, I'll fight you. I'm happy to fight you, but like tomorrow.
Yeah,
like we get paid tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right now we get hurt for no money. Tomorrow we get paid. Let's do
we'll do
tomorrow.
It. Yeah. That's great.
But yeah, your recent comment. I remember watching one of the UFC, super fights or early, and it's a 30-minute fight, and they probably spent 27 minutes on the ground with Gracie and Ken Shamrock, I think.
Yeah.
And, maybe that wasn't the most exciting thing for the audience to watch.
Right, that's the problem. Sometimes it creates stalemates. There was one fight, like the longest fight that I know of that was like a sanctioned pro fight was Royce Gracie versus Kazushi Sakuraba. I don't know if you know about this fight, but this was this was in a Pride show, and they agreed to fight an infinite amount of 15-minute rounds. That was the time. And they ended up fighting, I think they fought like an hour and a half is what they did. Yeah, I think it was 6 rounds. So they fought like an hour and 30 minutes. And then Hoist didn't answer the bell. I think it was like fatigued, his leg was chopped up. But they literally fought an hour and a half. And then he did, his corner threw in the towel at the end of, I think, the 6th round. But that's pretty crazy to fight for an hour and a half.
Yeah, what's a street fight last 30 seconds?
Yeah.
So it's a very different, hard for a lot of people to imagine.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine.
But then like a lot of strategy comes into play, because it's like you're also being very careful not to get tired, because the first guy to get tired is going to lose, right? So you're doing just enough, okay, but I don't want to use too much energy because I'll get tired. This guy's going to like take advantage of it. So they're both kind of moving slowly to make sure they don't hit that fatigue, because it's going to go forever, right? Because if you don't finish the guy, you're in trouble, right? If you like put a lot of energy out and don't finish him, you've wasted a lot of energy.
What are key skills or maybe a bullet list of prep work for somebody who maybe is an MMA fan or they don't understand fighting the way that you do, but they're listening to us, they're tracking the conversation, but from my perspective, and you'd understand with more nuance, but for a guy to be a good fighter, like you have to be a certain type of personality to begin with. That it's not enough to just be like a tough guy or something. But there's a lot of fighters are smarter than the naive public thinks. That you have to have a decent IQ to be able to learn things, or either body memory or intellectual skills, or hopefully both.
Yeah, at the highest level for sure.
Yeah, at the high level, I think both of the people that I've met that are multi-time champions tend to be smart, and good athletes. That they're good at learning and remembering physical movements, but also, pretty intellectually sound people. So you got to be, pretty smart person. Good genetics helps.
Absolutely.
Got to work your ass off for, years and years. The diet stuff, that's where they'd lose me. Is, some a guy's cutting, 12-15% of his body. You walk around body weight, you might be down 20%.
Yeah.
And then, after weigh-ins, they might rehydrate 10-12%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that by itself is a feat that, they're not going in there at their, most powerful, robust level of fitness. You got to get into that lower weight, and then, And I'm sure there's some more things you'd add in there: cardio, endurance.
I think, yeah. Well, I think mental toughness is maybe number one, right? And like everything you just said, I think requires that mental toughness, like to be able to like cut all that weight, to do all those things. It requires you to endure uncomfortable situations, long duration with no water when you're thirsty, or no food, and training on an empty, without calories, and just putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation. One of the most important things, I think, just like if there was like a genetic checklist, is that natural level of kind of muscle endurance, wrestling, conditioning. And everyone's baseline is different. Some people have a low baseline, some people have a high baseline without exercise. Then some people exercise and they're like high responders, so they respond to exercise very well and they shoot way up. Some people exercise a lot and they don't change their baseline too much. So there's a lot of factors. But I think this is one of the most most important genetic advantages a guy can have, is that high level conditioning, even without training hard. Some guys, they work maybe semi-hard, they're training, but maybe they're not killing themselves every day like another guy, but their conditioning is like through the roof. And these are the guys that I usually see are at the top of the pack, that are fighting for the titles, that are winning titles, that are, main event, winning fight after fight. They're always in every fight. They can pull it up. They can win in the first minute or the last minute. And this is, I think, one of the best advantages you can have. I never had that, by the way.
What do you think are the things that a person has control over that they themselves can, despite whatever their genetic predisposition might be, what are some of the key factors that you would say are, weigh most heavily to somebody that's out there yelling, stand him up, or doesn't understand the myriad of things that goes into being a high-level professional fighter?
Well, I mean, most important is just be in the gym. I think be a gym rat. The more you're in there, I mean, I say this all the time, it's very simple and silly, but I always tell guys, like, you never know what day you're going to learn your new favorite move, or your new best move, right? But you're not going to learn it at home. So just be in the gym, be hanging out, be working on technique. Just doesn't have to be always crazy hard, but just be around the gym a lot. I don't like it when guys will have a fight and they'll disappear for 3 weeks, or kind of in and out of the gym. I mean, there's some guys that have success with that. I mean, that wasn't me. I was kind of a gym rat. I was in there every day, twice a day, like year after year. The only time I took off is when I was like seriously hurt and I had no choice, And even then I was in there probably watching, getting mental reps. But I don't think I had the best genetics necessarily for it. And for me, that was what I could control. One thing I can control is my effort and how often I'm there. Maybe I can get an advantage by just training more than other people.
Yeah, I asked Jake Shields, at the peak of his career, he had won 15 fights in a row. Didn't lose a fight for about 7 years.
Yeah.
And then he fought George St. Pierre, for
the belt. Yeah, this is huge.
Fought George for the belt at the end of that.
Beat some very good guys. Yeah.
Two of the judges gave him 2 rounds out of 5 on the GSP fight. At that time, George hasn't lost a round. He's won his last 30-something rounds in a row. Yeah. So that was still impressive to win. 2 out of 5 was nobody else did that when they fought
one
George.
Of the absolute greatest of all times. Yeah.
And I asked Jake, what were some of your lifestyle habits, or what was different about you to have that level of performance and that level of success during that period of your life? And there's plenty of other people there that are also quite talented, and what helped you have those outcomes. And one of the comments he made, among several, he said that there's a lot of guys, they win a fight and they want to go on vacation for a month.
Yeah.
And you just made that comment, take 3 weeks off.
Yeah.
He said, if I won a fight on Saturday, I'd fly home on Sunday and try to get some rest. And Monday I was back in the gym. Yeah. I was back in my training Monday. And other guys are taking a month off, and they're getting drunk and whatever else they might be doing. Yeah. And which wasn't conducive to maintaining their conditioning and their momentum.
Yeah, and you I think you can't. I don't know if you can force it. It almost has to be. You have to want to do that, right? You can't like. I mean, you can make yourself do it a few times, but to never waver, to always choose that path, has to be kind of in you. You got to have that natural drive and desire, I think. Or maybe you are just that disciplined where even if you didn't want to do it, you could make yourself do it all the time. But
I didn't take one day off in my 30s. I just worked, and I wish I did more of that in my 20s. I didn't take too many days off in my 20s either. And some people think that's. I've heard little criticisms about that. As what's really important is balance.
Yeah.
Those people tend to be dumber and poorer than I am.
Yeah.
And so the loudest critics that talk the most, balance. I think balance is great. When you're our age.
Hard to be great at something though.
Yeah, we had different goals.
With balance, yeah.
We just had different goals. That's how, I'm not mad at those people. I don't think about them much at all. But that's I have that thought. I'm like when I hear that sort of person, that I'm not sure that it's wise to take advice from somebody that has dramatically different goals than you do.
Very true, 100%.
I think about that. There's, balance is great. That this is a new idea for me. So if I'm a little clunky in my words about this topic, it's because my brain is adjusting to the idea. Because I just obsessively thought about money. Money to me just means freedom. In my head, money was the freedom to spend my later years the way that I might like to.
For sure.
And so when I say money, all I really mean is the freedom to spend your time how you might want to, and the freedom to be away from people that you wouldn't choose to spend time with, and have a few extra luxuries or comforts in life.
Security.
Yeah. And so I want to hear other people balance. I don't know. I don't think I would have been happier, or if I would have been lazier. But there's plenty of times. And sometimes I did that out of passion or internal motivation, and sometimes sometimes I slept 90 minutes, and I'm like, well, the alarm clock's going off, and I got shit to do, and but my brain says, well, I don't feel like it. I don't want to do the thing. And then I remind myself, well, the success gods don't give a shit what I feel like today.
Yeah.
The success gods have no heart or no mercy for my feelings. They only care about my behaviors. So what are the best behaviors I should be engaging in today? And then I drag my half-dead corpse and get out of bed and throw some water on me and go get things done.
You would sometimes sleep only like an hour and a half, like 90 minutes.
That wasn't a normal thing, but many times I sleep 3-4 hours, and if you had something to do, you slept 80 minutes and you got up and you did it. And, I'm not saying that 90 minutes was a normative sleep schedule,
of course.
as evidence that I'm still alive.
Right.
But there's plenty of times that are frequently 3 hours, very frequently 5 hours, and occasionally 80,
always
90
deprived,
minutes.
always kind of sleep deprived.
And people talk bad about that. And there's, if you're a peak performance athlete, probably you should sleep.
I think some people handle it better than others. Some people can function better.
And I think I could,
Yeah. But then again, also, might be different with an athlete where you need to recover the muscles and stuff like this. Maybe you need a little more. But I think
I would agree with that.
But for your brain,
certainly.
you could learn. You have more time to get shit done or learn
Some
more.
people can't. Some people, there's arguments, and I believe the data is probably true, that for some people, they'd argue that, your brain doesn't function at 100% if you're sleep deprived.
Yeah.
And I'd argue, I would agree, that's probably true.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if somebody's, if you're having 18 hours of real productivity in a day, and somebody else who is optimizing, for brain functions, they slept better than you did, and they, spent
getting 10 hours of work done.
They spent 80 minutes making a perfect meal, and they did this, and they all the little, and they got 8 hours of work done, and I got 18 hours of work done, and probably they got 5 hours of work done and called it 8, and I got 18 hours of real work done, and so per hour, if you took to be a weird nerd, if you thought of IQ points versus hour of time or something committed, do they have better output per hour? Perhaps. But a lot of times I was putting in 3 times as many hours as other people were.
And getting more accomplished. Yeah.
And I always
makes sense.
I had this obsession about compounding the gains, and that's true in money. When people hear about compounding, financial compounding, they just think of you could imagine an exponential chart or what that looks like in terms of investments. But it's not just it's not just the money invested over a period of time at a certain percentage rate. It's also the compounding of, is intellectual compounding of if I can learn more early in life, if you can learn more early, then learning more allows you to learn even more. It allows you
Right.
to learn even more and have more elaborate and precise models that
Yeah.
when a new piece of information enters, you can assess it quickly. Is that relevant given my goals? Do we discard that over here? Or where do we integrate that in the model where that might be another useful tidbit of information? And then there's also social compounding, that when a person's behaving that way, you're more readily accepted in other groups of people who have a similar culture of high performance or high expectation of themselves. And having the intellectual compounding and the social compounding helps bring more resources to have a bigger base for the financial compounding. And when you think about that over the terms of a couple decades, it makes quite a difference.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And somebody else, they took more time to chill. Just chill, man. More balance, man. Pet my dog, man.
Yeah.
Like, all right,
yeah.
cool.
But that's not
They're still
usually an overachiever, right?
I'm not even saying it's healthy. Some people wouldn't do this. I actually had this conversation with Gilbert Burns a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And, Gilbert's become a friend over time. I know he's at a different gym, but you guys all know each other.
He's a great guy.
And, Gilbert and I were laughing about this exact topic, that he thought about jiu-jitsu the way that I was thinking about business.
Yeah.
And we have these, inhuman alien type conversations that, if an alien observer was watching some of these, the detailed nerditry of our conversation, they'd be like, yeah, those aren't normal humans. They're aliens too,
Mm-hmm.
They're not like the others.
For sure.
And he and I were discussing, his obsessiveness with his skill set and my obsessiveness with my skill set. And he's saying, well, I need to be more like you and you want to be more like me and so on. And we were laughing about that. And we were describing that sort of obsessive personality, as some sort of a mental illness, jokingly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, who's more mentally ill? Is it someone who think of the people that you grew up with, and you can imagine 2 or 3 of them in your mind right now. And if I think of the people that I grew up with, they're dead. So I don't know who was more unhealthy. These people who did not much, or someone who was
Obsessive,
obsessed
compulsive.
about getting
Yeah.
something done. So who had better outcomes over time? I don't think that he and I certainly would have traded places with our comparative others from
Yeah.
youth, and I doubt that you would trade places with. I don't know much about your upbringing, but I doubt you'd trade places with some of your friends that chilled more when they were young.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, obsessive compulsive, especially if it's with a positive skill or motive, it can be huge. I think that's definitely a way to success, right? Being obsessed with something all the time, putting more time than anybody. That'll get you to the top of many industries, whether it's athletics, I'm sure business, or I'm sure academics, whatever it might be.
Mike, you've been a multi-time world champion yourself. You've worked with numerous world champions in various elements of MMA. And you've been around some of the most successful combat athletes and arguably some of the best athletes, period, in the world. So you personally know what it takes to win from personal experience and also watching others, helping others. What are some of the things that you see for somebody, and success is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people are, 50% of people are going to be in the bottom 50%. Statistically, that's just true. Right? And a lot of people might hustle their way into the 70th or 80th percentile and say, hey, I'm above average. I'm doing a lot above average. And they maybe they're okay with that. And I'm not mad at those people. Our paths aren't going to cross much in life, but I'm not mad at them people, and I wish them well. But for somebody that wants to be a top performer, that has that thought of being a world champion, or at least in the top 1%, welcome
Yeah.
into that group somewhere. Yeah. What are some of the things they would have to say no to say yes to having those sort of outcomes of elite outcomes or top level outcomes?
Well, I think occasionally you get a guy or a girl who might have just hit the genetic lottery, where occasionally, and I'm sure it's with all industries, maybe it's just could be like a genetic gift that puts them well ahead of the pack. And this could be intelligence in business, this can be speed, power, endurance, and fighting. This sometimes is a factor. But I think for most people, I think it's obsession, like and it almost can't be faked. It has to be a natural drive, maybe maybe an OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder type mentality, where it's just all you want to do, all you think about, putting, like you talked about earlier, more hours than everybody else. And it almost like can't be faked. It almost has to be something that comes, you have to want to do that. Because you can fake it for maybe a day or two or maybe a week, but you can't fake it for years, right? This is like, or you're going to be real miserable and probably have some sort of mental breakdown. I think that's what it is. I think it's most of the greats that I know, unless they were just extremely gifted, were obsessive compulsive. And also starting young helps as well, right? The earlier, the better. Same with business, same with like investing, right? The more time in the market, obviously, the more money you're gonna make. But I use this analogy a lot with there's something different when you learn something at a very young age. Like if you learn a language at an early age, you can speak fluently without an accent. But if you learn a language when you're 20 years old for the first time, you've never spoke Spanish a day in my life, I try to learn, I can spend 15 years speaking nothing but Spanish. I'll always have some sort of accent. But if I learned the same language when I was 8 or 5 or whatever it is, I'll speak completely fluent with zero accent. I'm not a scientist, but there's obviously something going on when the brain is developing. If you can put that like blueprint in there with whatever you're trying to learn at a younger age, I feel like it's a deeper understanding, a deeper knowledge. It's like ingrained in the wiring of your brain at a young age. It's a different understanding of the concepts and ideas that you're trying to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, plenty of things I wish I started earlier in life that I would have loved to take advantage of the neuroplasticity, I think they call it, of the flexibility of your neural pathways to be built around a topic. Would have made a lot of things easier later on. I did have the advantage of thinking about finance and wealth that way. MMA, I'm learning. I never spent any time early in life until my 40s to start taking that seriously, and I learned very quickly, but probably in an unorthodox way. But I learned very quickly that if somebody shows me something a couple times, then I have to sit and think about that like an autistic person, which I'm not making fun of. I mean, quite sincerely, that I sit around and kind of look at the ceiling or look out the window and think about that for 30 seconds or 90 seconds, and then I can visualize it in my head, and then I can make a checklist of I have to do procedure A, B, C, D, E. I have to do it in this order. I have to sequence this before that and that like that. And if I can put that in my head, and then I can go do it about 70, 80%, and then I can do it a couple times like that and have it done to me a couple more times. Then I can sit and look like a weirdo again, and then do it again. And one of your guys made a comment to me, Alexi, when I was training with him. He said, normally he's got to explain something to a guy about 10 times. And he said, if he tells me twice, then I understand. And, this is not an area that I've worked on during my life, but my brain works well. And maybe the most important part is I have very good retention after that. Like after I got it. So that's great. But, some people don't have that naturally. I don't think I had that naturally. I think that, some elements of that is, is brain structure, and some of that is just training yourself of, what are the other things that I was good at in life, and how does this relate to that? And if I can build that web together of like, how does this relate to something that I already know? And I say that to a lot of people that are, if they're thinking about being a client of mine, they can't just go join one of my courses. Probably same in your life. They can't just go join one of my courses. I won't take their money. They can click a button and give me money. I don't want their money.
Right. Yeah.
You fill out an application, you request an interview, and I want to know that they're already good at something and they're already sincere about learning, what I would help them with.
You have so much time.
I don't have time to spend with somebody that you don't either. you can't spend time with somebody you can't be more dedicated to their success than they are.
100%. That's a good point.
If they're not going to show up and do what's necessary, then
1,000%.
your time is much better spent with someone else, and I don't have time for that either. But I've thought this many times that I think certainly by grad school level, I think I had an average IQ there. I was around a lot of very smart people, and some of them had higher IQ than I did for sure. And a lot of them didn't do much with it. Mm-hmm. And I thought even early in life, there's people that, as a child I looked at, and, my father was in prison for cocaine trafficking. He had a 15-year prison sentence. My mother was not a very stable person. And, I looked at other people's lives and I thought man, that's, I thought they had it a lot better than me. Mm-hmm. And some of them squandered that so badly that I don't really have the type of personality to be, jealous or envious of somebody else. If my version of envy, I suppose, if I saw somebody that had something I wanted, I wasn't mad at them, but I thought, what could I do to earn that for myself?
Yeah.
What could I do to get one of those or develop that skill or so on, So I never had any hostility or negativity in my mind about it. Even as a child, I didn't feel that way, but I think I believed that I could, I'll figure it out. What could I learn from them to figure it out and do better, But some people that I thought they really had a lot better circumstances, they didn't do shit with it, And I think that, you must have seen numerous people in your life or people that came into the gym that they might have had more natural talent, but they didn't have the other psychological components that go with that, to the right work ethic. Or you must have seen some people that just
100%.
Tremendously out-hustled people that they might not have the natural talent, but they pushed through,
Yeah, I mean, I think fighters in general, most of them, high percentage of them come from probably unstable households. Not all of them, of course, but it's kind of one of those businesses that people get into usually with an kind of unstable home life, usually for whatever reason. I'm not certain. It's a tough way to make money, right? It's not easy. I also think nowadays it's almost like you're a minority if you had a stable upbringing. It's really uncommon almost, to have two parents who were together and had a normal life. It's not always extreme case where maybe you're had a parent who went to prison or something like this. This is not quite as normal. But to have your both parents together, not divorced, it's like a small percentage of the population these days, right? It's not very common.
My parents should have been divorced. And really more that my father should have left my mother more than the other way around. That my father, despite his version of entrepreneurship that I didn't really care to follow suit with, he was a pretty industrious guy, a pretty ambitious guy. And, if I think of the family that he came, his father was a factory worker who later on was the general manager of the factory, and he's managing 160 guys or something at a door and window factory. But his father never finished high school, and he's doing manual labor the first half of his life.
Yeah.
And then his grandfather was a coal miner and from Poland. So from his perspective, in the late 70s and early 80s, the drug trade in America, there was tremendous money to be made, and it was this kind of a greed is good period of Wall Street. And I'm not saying that that's the best profession to be in. It's not a profession that I would want to be in, but I could understand. I had some, I never was mad at him or something, or I could understand. I'm like, all right, well, he's a pretty ambitious guy, but probably could have found some different paths to, exercise his entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
My mother, on the other hand, just kind of sat around and didn't do much and then complained perpetually. And I thought that was a lot more f***ed up. So, but I hear your main point that some people have a more stable family life. It's not been my experience that I see those people that if you had kind of stereotyped 50s, 60s, good family.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of those people become high achievers though. They get stuck in a middle class type mindset that everything's good, everything's good enough that there's no reason to do, extreme things, or they don't have the dissatisfaction with their current circumstances to do what's necessary to have dramatically enhanced circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's the case a lot of times. But I can see exceptions too to those rules. But Yeah.
I don't say there's no exceptions.
Of course, yeah, but I think you're right.
As a generality, if you have the social pressure that you grew up in a so-called, great family, or, if your parents went to a top university and they're making a lot of money, or they're, recognized as, admired people in society, then maybe the kid has that pressure that it was decided before birth in some families that before the kid was born, it was decided, like, of course the kid's going to go to college, of course they're going to graduate school, of course they're going to do these other few things and some extracurriculars. And I certainly didn't have that upbringing, but I had the exact opposite. But that sort of person has a pressure that they're expected to get good grades in school and expected to perform in extracurriculars, and they could follow that path. They may or may not be happy inside, but they could have what society might consider success and in the terms of admired by others or above average income, et cetera. On the other side of there's a subset of people that had quite shitty circumstances growing up, and they had a different type of motivation. That I was very angry in my childhood. I wasn't always so calm and pleasant as I am today. I was very angry about my childhood, and I really had like a firm thought of like, F this. And I didn't know what I needed to do, but I knew that I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to go make a better life. And I had a lot of negative role models, but you see a lot of people that you're like, all right, so, heroin doesn't look like a good path forward or something. Right. So I've seen a lot of nasty things like that. Well, I'm definitely not doing that. Yeah. And I'm definitely not doing that. But I didn't have a lot of positive role models. So I had to go earn that. And I think that was maybe another addiction in my life is, answering that question, how do I make myself useful to others that, other high quality people would be happy to help me out with this or help me out with that along the way. I wouldn't have had that same motivation if things were more comfortable in my childhood. I don't think I would have had that some of the same oomph or grumpiness or tenacity necessary that at different times I just would have slept in more,
But always business minded you were, yeah? When you were young, even at a young age, were you always?
I wanted to have a nicer life and more freedom and
stability.
I didn't have a lot of stability. Right. So to me, I wanted more freedom, or I wanted to have nice things, or I didn't give a shit about. I have a few million social media followers, but today I still don't give a shit about any public. I'd like to be well respected by other people who I respect.
Your peers, of course.
Does that make sense? I think you'd get that.
Yeah,
I'd like to be well respected
by your peers in general is what everybody wants.
I would be delighted. I don't mind saying, but I'd be delighted if 90% of my following fucked off and did something else. Yeah. And but the 10% that I would get along with the best were still there. I'd be delighted if I could wiggle my nose, as you said, and get rid of 90%.
Bewitched.
A lot of people, they're just entertainment. They watch something. Think of the skills and knowledge that you've developed over the years. And you're a very humble guy, but I know some of the people that you've coached and trained with, and even the way they say your name, there's a respect the way they say your name, that they learned a lot from you. They have tremendous respect for you, and these are people that are world champions, best in the world in what they do. So when I think of the knowledge or usefulness of that's in your mind or in my mind, I have several clients that I've helped them make life-changing amounts of money, millions of dollars, plural, and not all of them, but some of them I help them get a 40% raise, and they're happy with that. And some of them I help them get $8 or $10 million, and they're happy too. But for somebody to watch, you or me, or hear a conversation with us, and they say, "Oh, that was fun," but they didn't learn one damn thing that's actually that they're going to take action and change a couple of neural pathways in their brain of like, maybe I should be more open-minded to this or that. I don't mind if they left my audience. I don't mind if they didn't watch. But I'd like to communicate to the couple people that are actually going to go do something.
Yeah. I mean, it's not always easy to make those changes in your head, right? It's like you got to really want to do it, and and I think everybody's different. And I mean, I think some of the things, if the people are looking for something like that, for me, it's a lot of that like cliche stuff that everybody talks about, of like, oh, write it down, make a list, all these basic things I think help and work if you want to be successful, right? Like, but You got to just get shit done.
There's an old story that story is not the right word, but there's a sound bite that I heard from Warren Buffett. And Warren says, make a list of the 25 things in order, make a list of the 25 things that are most important for you to accomplish or most important to do before you die. And I've done this in conference rooms before. We have a few hundred people, and we'll take 8 or 10 minutes, and so you just make in order, write them out, and then put a number next to them. What's the important ones, and then rewrite them again in order. You take a 10-minute break and let them do that. And Warren says, draw a line between number 3 and number 4. So order number 1 most important, second most. Draw a line between number 3 and number 4. And he says, cross out everything below that line. And he says, that's the price you'll have to pay if you're serious about accomplishing those top 3 things.
That's awesome.
And that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
That made a lot of sense to me. You're going to say no to most things if you really want to say yes to the few things you want most.
I love listening to him. Love any documentary I can get my hands on with him, any YouTube video with him speaking. He says a lot of real brilliant things, but super simple, right? He makes it sound so simple and easy to understand. Yeah, he's one of those. And I don't know anything about that world either, in investing and stuff, but he's the guy that makes it easy to understand.
I've learned a lot. I've made money taking action on some of his advice, his wisdom, for sure.
Yeah.
And it certainly has helped my life. So I'm grateful for his contributions. And there's a fellow named Charlie Munger who's his business partner. Yeah. And I think Charlie is extremely wise man. That it's amazing his name is not more mainstream. That a person could be as brilliant as Charlie Munger.
He's the more cynical one of the two, right? Kind of
he's a grumpy optimist. I'm a grumpy optimist as well. I'm an optimist, but there's a few layers of cynicism and grumpiness first.
Right. You got to get through that.
It's all right, if we're going to do this, what's it really going to look like? What's it really going to take to have a particular outcome? Yeah.
Realist.
I think so, yeah. I mean, idealism is called idealism instead of realism because the shit's not real.
100%.
There's a lot of people running around with their heads full of, all this idealism, and they tend to be disappointed people. They tend to be mad at the world that, they were born and the world's not perfect, and it's your fault. It's my fault. It's somebody else's fault. It's got nothing to do with them. They should have just they should have been born when they're at their birth. Things should have been perfect already, and we didn't do the right prep work for them. So you're a bad person.
So true.
So I think, idealism, yes, it sounds nice, but if the shit worked, make it work then, I guess the last question, I've asked 100 or so champions in various sports, Olympic medal winners and Super Bowl winners and so on, a lot of fighters. I've asked everybody the same question. They always give me the exact same answer. Different words, same answer, no pressure. Did you ever see anybody, you've been a great mentor to many people. Did you see anybody that had a Super Bowl ring or a gold medal on their neck or one of those fancy big belts around their waist, a trophy held high above their head and that universal sign of victory? You ever see anybody like that didn't have a great coach, great mentors in the background that helped them shortcut that learning and be on that path to victory?
Definitely not. I think, and it's not just a great coach, it's almost like you need that support structure. There's a bunch of things that are needed, maybe it's a great coach, maybe it's a great family that's helping you, that are also trying to push you forward. It's not easy one person trying to pull their way to the top of any industry. You need a little bit of assistance, whether it's a coach, whether it's a good family structure who's there to support you and allow you to pursue your dreams, and which will allow you to train more and put in the hours. If you got to work 40-hour a week some laborful job, it's going to be hard to put the hours in the gym that's going to be required to make it to the top of a sport. But I think you're right on the money. I think coaching and support system is 100% necessary.
I think I was very frustrated in the first half of my life that I didn't have good mentors, good role models. And I spent the second half of my life certainly trying to be around more and more people like that when I want to learn something, I'd like to learn from the best people in the world that are doing that. And I did that in academics, and I did that with real world business people.
Yeah.
And in MMA, I went, I had enough success in other areas in my life that I was welcome to be around, world champions and people that I knew socially first. Some people I knew for years socially, and I was never thinking about training when I established some of those early relationships. They're just interesting people in my life. But there's a great advantage to have access to, if you know a few world champions, and pretty soon you know a few more, and it's. I know an awful lot of people in your industry today that I didn't know even a year ago. Some of them, so. But to have access to some of those people and learn from their decades of hard work and creation and toil and to learn that wisdom, you could fumble around for a lifetime. You'd never invent these things by yourself. You have to find somebody who already did what you want to do and learn from them. And I think that is the shortcut.
Yeah, 100. It's a great point. You learn so much just being around successful people. Like so much I didn't even had any idea as I was growing up. I grew up in Maine, small town.
I've been to Portland, man. I looked at your Wikipedia. I seen Portland.
Yeah, so Portland, I grew up just outside of Portland. I still have a small place in South Portland, so I still go back once every couple of years. But yeah, being around successful people, you learn so much, or so much stuff that I had no idea growing up, because you're not exposed to especially like being in Florida. There's a lot more going on in Florida. There's a lot more wealth. There's a lot more high-level athletes. Maine is kind of small town, small business. I mean, of course, there are some big things going on there, but it's much more difficult to find. But being around successful people, you learn a lot of shortcuts pretty quickly, like you were saying, stuff you'd never find on your own.
I think maybe last thing we'd wrap up with is I found myself, and I think you'll agree with me, but I'm curious to hear your take on it, that you might have a more nuanced understanding. That I'd love to learn something. I built structures intentionally where there's the amount of work that you're willing to do for yourself, and then there's an additional amount of work that you'd feel ashamed if you didn't show up for your teammates or your partners, or you'd feel ashamed if you didn't show up, if you disappointed your coach or an important mentor,
Yeah.
And I've gone out of my way to build structures like that and to create, additional social pressure on myself that I've very seldom have the conversation with those specific people, but I've built relationships or held myself to a standard with those people that I knew what I was doing, and I was intentionally putting myself in a situation that when you were a bit low on sleep, or you got a little headache or a little tummy ache, you remember you love your goals more than your excuses, and it would be embarrassing to not get up and show up for the team. You might not show up for yourself that day, but you'd still got to get up and show up for the coach or your mentor or your team, and make that additional effort. That I imagine you've created an art or a science around this, maybe personally or with some of your students that you work with.
I mean, I don't know. I hope so, but I know I've felt that in the past, being on the other end, like for sure not wanting to let my coach down and giving that drive. And I mean, it was good, like really true words that you said, where I would have probably taken the easy route, but I didn't want to let my coach down. This is 100% so true words.
I think it's been very important for me and anybody else that I've seen do well, that you're not going to do it all by yourself. You can fumble around for your whole lifetime,
Yeah.
and you're not going to learn things by yourself that you could have learned from people that have already mastered specific skill sets, have already accomplished specific goals, and whatever it is that you want to get good at life. If you care about business, I can help you with that. I can help you with entrepreneurship, real estate, investing. If you want to learn about fighting, there's other people that are better trainers than I am for that. But whatever it is that you want to get serious about, find a great coach, integrate yourself to be a part of the team, and maybe a leader of the team, that you're willing to contribute more, you're willing to show up and make higher level effort and offer more to the group than others. And you'll be a natural leader in those environments if you choose to do that. But whatever you want to do, get yourself around those people that you can learn from the best, you can contribute to that group, that you'd be well respected by other people that you respect. And you're not going to do that by yourself. You have to have a coach, you have to have a mentor. Find that person in your life. It's a life changer for sure. Mike, thank you so much for coming through. I appreciate it. Big respect. Thank you.
Thank you.
You watch this video all the way through, and that tells me you're dedicated to learning more and earning far above average outcomes in your life. Congratulations for that. But now it's time to take action. If you could have earned those results by yourself, you would have done it already. My head coach has opened up a few spots on his high-demand calendar for an in-person, one-on-one strategy session to help you. On this call, we'll give you pragmatic advice that you can implement tonight to get laser-focused on the right metrics and leave mediocrity far behind in your past. Click that link right now in the description below and apply for your call immediately. Do it now.